G'day guys, my name's Nick. So in today's video, I'm going to show you guys all the steps necessary to change the automatic transmission fluid on your four-wheel drive. So the transmission fluid I'm going to be using today is Castrol Transmax Multi-Vehicle ATF. So this is a fully synthetic multi-vehicle ATF, which is perfect for the 5-speed and 6-speed Isuzu MU-X and D-Max boxes. So to carry out the automatic transmission oil change on the Isuzu MU-X and D-Max, we're going to need a couple of different tools. So what we need is a 14mm socket or spanner. We need a 5mm Allen key, a 24mm socket. We also need a funnel, a Tom Thumb pump or some way of transferring the oil into the transmission, some degreaser, some gloves, and I've got a little bit of cardboard here which I like to put on the ground underneath everything, and also a drain tray. Alrighty guys, so step number one is to take your vehicle for a 15 to 20 minute drive to get the transmission up to operating temperature and make sure that when we bring it back into the garage, the oil is hot enough to thin out and drop down to the sump. So when we change it, we get the most amount of oil out of the transmission. So let's go. Okay guys, so now we've taken the vehicle for a 15-minute drive. It's up to operating temp, the transmission's nice and warm, and now all the oil is going to drop down into the sump because it's nice and thin. So what we can do now is let the vehicle sit for a minute, get all our bits and pieces ready, and we can drain the oil. So I always like to chuck a bit of cardboard under the vehicle whenever I'm draining the oil. It really helps with catching all those little drips that escape the drain tray. So now we can get the drain tray under there and get the transmission draining. And I'll also take all of my tools and oil underneath the vehicle. Okay guys, so now we're under the vehicle and we're ready to drain the oil. So there's 3 different bungs in the transmission that I need to show you guys. So the first bung we're going to talk about is the fill bung. So this bung here is located on the driver's side of the transmission, almost back towards the transmission mount. So this 24mm bung is our transmission fill bung. So we need to take the fill bung out first to allow that oil to rush through. So I'll loosen off the fill bung now. So no oil will come out of the fill bung. So the fill bung is located high enough on the transmission so no oil will come out when we remove it. So there we go. The fill bung is now removed. I'll put that aside. Located on the bottom of the transmission we have 2 bungs. So we have a 14mm bung here, which is our drain bung. And we also have a 5mm Allen key bung here, which is our check bung. So the check bung is used when the vehicle is running. We remove it and we ensure that oil is running gently out of this hole to make sure that the transmission oil level is correct. Whereas the drain bung is what we'll use today to drain all of the oil out of the transmission. So what we'll do now is we'll loosen the 14mm drain bung and we'll drain all of the transmission oil into our drain pan. So it is also important to make sure that the drain pan that you choose has measurements on it. So we're going to use those measurements to ensure that the same amount of oil that we drain out of the transmission, we're putting back in. So now we can drain the transmission and measure exactly how much we get out. Alrighty, so I've got my drain pan under here. Going to loosen the 14mm nut under here. So just make sure when you loosen this that you have taken the fill bung out as well, because it will help all of that transmission oil just rush out. There we go. And we'll just let that drain fully, and I'll show you guys a little tip to get a little bit extra out of the transmission as well. So while this is draining guys, how do you know if your transmission oil needs changing? So it's a really good idea to change your transmission oil every 60 to 80,000 kilometers, depending on the driving conditions that the vehicle is under. So if you do a lot of towing, it's probably a good idea to change that transmission oil a little bit earlier to make sure that you don't have any damage in the future. So what we're doing today is a transmission oil change. You can get a transmission oil flush if your transmission oil is very, very dirty and it hasn't been changed. So with a transmission oil flush, you'll need to take your vehicle to a transmission specialist. They'll hook up a machine which hooks into where the trans cooler lines go. It will suck the oil out of one line and feed it back into the other line when the vehicle is running. So that will pretty much ensure that you get the most amount of oil out of the transmission as possible. So with an automatic transmission, you do have a torque converter which holds about 4 to 5 litres of oil, which cannot be drained via the drain bung. So what we're doing today is a transmission oil change, which changes the oil in the sump and changes the majority of the oil to make it a lot better quality. So as well as changing the transmission oil, you can change the transmission oil filter. So as you can see, the transmission oil is slowing down to a drip now. Now, the transmission drain is recessed a little bit, so what we can do is jack the front of the car up a bit to get the rest of that oil out. So what that'll do is get almost another litre out of the transmission, which will definitely help with our transmission oil change. So I'll just let that drain until it's finished dripping, and then I'll let the car down. So now I've let all the transmission oil drain out of here. Now I can put the drain bung back in. So I'll just put that back in and just give it a little nip. Just nip it up. And then we can refill the trans. So you can see here I've drained out about 3.5 litres. So what I'm going to do now is just put 3.5 litres back into the transmission through the fill bung. So I've just put my Tom Thumb pump into the container of oil, and on the side is some measurements. So these are 4 litre containers, so I'm just going to pump down 3.5 litres and leave 500 mils in the bottle. So now it's time to fill the transmission, so I'm going to use the fill bung up here, which I took out earlier. I'm just going to put my little Tom Thumb hose in there and start pumping. Perfect. So that's 3.5 litres into the transmission now. So now I can pull out my Tom Thumb pump. There we go. And we can put the fill bung back in. So now we've changed the transmission oil once. Now I'm going to go for a drive and repeat the steps that we did earlier in the video. So to ensure that our transmission oil quality remains as high as possible, we need to change the transmission oil 2 or maybe 3 times each time we service it. So because we can only get the transmission oil out of the sump and not out of the torque converter unless we have a special machine, we need to change that oil multiple times each time we service it. So I'm going to go for another drive and we're going to change the transmission oil once more, and then I'll catch you guys back here to show you exactly how to check the level when you finish the job. Alrighty guys, so I've changed my transmission oil again and the fluid coming out is looking really fresh and clean. So what I'm going to do now guys is show you how to check the transmission oil level. So for this check, the transmission should be around 50 to 60 degrees, but what I usually do is once I put my fresh transmission oil in the second or third time when you're finished, you run the vehicle and immediately jump under and check it. So if you do that, the transmission should be around this temperature. It should be nice and cool, and it should be perfect temperature for you to check it through this bung. So we've got our 5mm Allen key. I'm going to loosen this bung off with the car running, and what I should see is a gentle stream just coming out of this check bung. And if I do see that, then it's perfect. If I don't, I need to put a bit more fresh oil through the fill bung until I see it rush out. The other way to check the transmission oil temperature is to get a scan tool or an OBD2 reader and check the data of the transmission. So there you'll be able to see the automatic transmission fluid temperature, and you should be able to check it at the appropriate temperature. It was overfilled a little bit, so I'll let it drain out just till it's a slow stream. So you can see it's a gentle stream now, so that's perfect. So we can put the check bung back in, and we know that our transmission oil level is spot on. So now we're all done under here, we'll just give it a bit of a clean down. Bit of degreaser. We'll give it a bit of a hose off, and we can go for a good drive and then come back and make sure that we have no leaks. So now that my automatic transmission fluid has changed, I'm going to have trouble-free motoring for around 60 to 80,000 Ks until I have to change that fluid again. So what I'm going to do guys is drop down in the description and in the comments below a couple of tools and bits and pieces that'll make the job a hell of a lot easier for you guys. So you can find those, follow the link, and you can get those bits and pieces to make the job super easy. And also, Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and stay tuned for more 4-wheel driving and accessory fitting videos. Cheers guys.